Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. I'm so glad you're with us, whether you're joining us locally here on the airwaves in Santa Barbara, California, at TV Santa Barbara, or at goodlifetelevision.org, where we see you're joining us from all over the world. And so we're grateful. You can also find us on all the social media platforms. Great stories. Good Life is here to honor, to inspire, to encourage, to uplift. We dwell on the good. We also we keep it real. And so we talk about real issues and real struggles and real suffering. And of course, today in the world, there is a lot of suffering. And so we don't ignore that, but we also shine light. And so that's what we're doing. And that's what we're doing today. I'm so excited about my guest. Josh Youssef is with me. Josh is the president and CEO of Help the Persecuted. Josh, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Dean. Good to be on.
Josh is they're headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, and Help the Persecuted, as I've read about it, is a wonderful thing, doing wonderful things throughout the world. And so we're going to talk about that. And I know, Josh, previous to Help the Persecuted, you served for 17 years in global media ministry, and you've done all kinds of things. But tell us kind of about just you before we get into kind of the work. Kind of talk about you and kind of growing up. And I know you've been involved in ministry work for a long time, but kind of talk about growing up and your background.
Yeah, happy to. Grew up as a pastor's kid. Michael Youssef is my father, pastor of a church here in Atlanta, Georgia, and wasn't always a media, ministry associated with my father's church, but grew into that. And when I left university in the early 2000s, my father had asked me to kind of come and work with him and help establish media in the Middle East and North Africa, where our family is originally from Egypt. And so I still helped sort of build out some of the radio programs, and then ultimately we moved into television. And in 2009, we launched a channel on multiple satellite platforms throughout Europe, Middle East, and North Africa, both in Arabic, French, and English. And at that point, I began to build out what we call a follow-up network and an audience relations network. So people would contact us. We would get 2,000 to 3,000 pieces of mail a month, and WhatsApp and Facebook posts and all kinds of communications back from people in the field. And then our field team would actually respond to those people at sort of a frontline level. And so I built that network from Morocco all the way to Iraq, of different team members, indigenous team members who would respond to people. And it was in that, not too long after we built that satellite network, that a lot of our field team were saying to us, the problems that these people are dealing in, the problems that these people are facing are much more complex than I need a Bible. Many of these people who've left Islam or come to faith in Jesus are being persecuted. They're being kicked out of their homes. They're, being ostracized from community. There's a term we use called civic death, which is when somebody leaves Islam and the community basically sort of attempts to really strangle them back to Islam. So they cut off their credit card or their cash, they take their passport, their ability to earn a living. And so I thought about it and I prayed about it, and the board at the time said, look, let's set up a small fund and we'll use those funds to help these people get out of trouble. And what started as a little $100,000 a year fund to help these people is now a $7 million a year organization that takes cases. Last year we helped 46,000 people, persecuted Christians, helps cases from various forms of persecution, where we take them and help them, get them into safe housing, get them out of a dangerous situation, and even into what we call enduring livelihood, which are little packages of grants that help them establish a business or establish a way of earning income outside of the society which disagrees with what they're doing.
Wow. That is wonderful. And I want to get into the details of that. I'm a pastor's kid too.
Okay, that's
So we
great.
both survived it somehow.
That's good.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, what tell the did you come to the Lord early in your life? I mean, did you have an encounter early? What was your own faith journey like?
I mean, when I was 7, I definitely remember my father talking to me about the Lord and about the need to receive him as savior. And I think in that moment, I probably did it because I trusted my dad. I knew that he
Yeah,
had my best interest in mind. But and I would say that I was a good person through high school and into college. And I think I was a Christian. I was probably just not growing. But my senior year in college, there was a river accident that took place between me and 3 friends. We'd gone to canoe a river, and the hydroelectric dam had been released upstream when we went out on this canoe, and 2 of my friends almost died that day. We ultimately those 2 were rescued, and they spent time in a hospital. But the Lord really spoke to me in a very clear and unique way that day. It was April 26, 2001, and yeah, I just knew something had changed, and something the way that I viewed the world, the way that I viewed work, the way that I think I viewed sin was all changed that day. And so my wife and I often debate, was that the day that I was saved? Um, I don't know. I definitely know that I came to a much more real understanding concerning the Lord, and my devotion to him certainly went to a new level.
yeah, that's so true. I think I probably have a pretty similar story to that. Where there's a journey, a faith journey that maybe starts young, but then has moments of real deepening and kind of changing based on life experiences
Mhm.
and like you had. So I think that's fantastic. And I think it's great that you're building on the legacy of your dad. And I've read a little bit about Dr. Youssef, and that's also wonderful. And that you've stepped out and built this, help the persecuted. It's really great. So I want to talk about, first of all, the situation. So people that are watching this are not going to know, because I had very little idea until I started reading about you. People are not going to know about the situation that's actually happening in the world
Mm.
in terms of the persecution, and you're talking specifically about the persecution of Christians. So educate us in terms of what is actually happening in the world as it relates to persecution of Christians, the numbers, where, how, and so forth.
Well, during the Trump administration era, uh, President Trump and Vice President Pence would have these regular meetings at the State Department in the summertime regarding this issue of persecution. And it was really kind of a broad persecution conference. This religious freedom ministerial is what they called it, and Ambassador Brownback was the one who really put all that together. But it focused on persecution globally. And at those conferences, they would often say that the most persecuted religion in the world today is Christianity. And I think that caught a lot of people by surprise. That data point catches people by surprise, because we don't experience that necessarily in the West, in the US or Canada or Australia or England. But the rest of the world, which is really a majority of the world's population, the reality is, for the Christian population, they are operating in a minority paradigm. And so, whether it's within the Islamic uh, world, the Christian minority experiences a heavy degree of persecution, or it's in China, where there's still continues to be crackdown on Christian pastors and church leaders. So it is hard for people in the West to understand that, but it is a big issue, and particularly in the Middle East, North Africa, Central Asia. As you look at Iran and Afghanistan, there's not just a persecution at a state level, because some of those countries are absolutely working very hard to eradicate the Christian church, but not just at a state level, but at a familial level. So families, in fact, probably more so than the state, are persecuting their own people when they leave Islam, whether they leave Islam for an atheism or an agnostic kind of view, or Christianity. And so that is the reality globally of where the church sits.
And I've heard talking about the state. I mean, I think about India. I worked for an organization that's done a lot of work in India, and I forget what you call those brown coat, people, but there's a lot of persecution of Christians in India, isn't there?
There are, and it's surprising because you've got down in Kerala in the west, south and west, you've got a good Christian population, but the state, the Hindu population can actually be quite antagonistic towards Christians, not just
Right.
Muslims. There's, I've often thought that maybe over time, as India becomes more capitalistic, that they might change their course, but it doesn't appear that that's been the case. Probably the worst state-sponsored terrorist states would be Iran and Afghanistan. Iran takes it to another level. I mean, there's very few Iranian Christians, including two on our staff, one in Iran and one in a neighboring country. But they both have spent time in jail, significant. One spent 3 years in jail for his faith. And so, and this is just commonplace when you talk to Iranian Christians. They suffer significantly.
Wow. And so, in some of the literature I saw that it says more than 360 million face extreme persecution worldwide. Every 2 hours, a Christian is killed for their faith. Christians in the Muslim world are often seen as second-class citizens and treated accordingly. And Muslims who come to faith in Christ face possible death, torture, loss of family, and employment. So there is a lot of suffering that's going on in relationship to this. And so talk about the vision, what Help the Persecuted does, how you do it, and kind of the vision for your involvement.
Yeah, so we are essentially ministers of the gospel who seek to rescue, restore, and rebuild the lives of persecuted Christians. And for us, that takes on a different, it looks different in different situations. There's not a cookie cutter approach, but broadly speaking, we like to see people flourish in their own community. We don't want to just remove them from danger and bring them to Canada, the US and Australia, and have them come to the West. We actually want to see them grow in their own communities and establish themselves. So we have a Muslim, what we call MBBs, Muslim background believers. And so we want Muslim background believers to meet other Muslim background believers and have children and grow the MBB church. And so a lot of times that looks different in different environments, but we will sometimes remove someone if they're in grave danger. We might remove them from one Arab state, one Arab country, to another Arab country. And this is another thing that I think Westerners find challenging to get their heads around, is that even in the most moderate Islamic state or Arab state, your ID card, your driver's license card, your birth certificate, everything has your religion on it. And so not just your religion on your ID card, but even people would know by your birth name whether you're a Christian or a Muslim. So this idea of identity, of religious identity, is so baked into every aspect of these people's lives that they, in some cases, they cannot remove themselves from that. So they cannot pull away from that identity. And so we will sometimes move them to a neighboring country where, in a sense, they take on a new identity. They can establish themselves in that country, remove the religion from their ID card, and establish themselves as a Christian. And so and the local community doesn't know who they are because they're new. So we've done that in many cases where we've removed them and brought them into a new community where they flourish and grow. And you have whole churches, whole congregations that would be made up of just converts, no ethnic Christians in their population. So it takes on different forms for each case. In some cases, we can remove them from a city within their country and into another city. And we have these cases called, we call it enduring livelihood, where they are kind of small grants to help set up a business. And then we have a process whereby we track the performance of that business and help them with their business plan and the modeling of that. And it's been very exciting to see that it's not only created jobs for people who were essentially jobless and kept out of the job market, but it's then they've created jobs for people just like them, converts who come and work in their business, in their shop, in their factory, or whatever it is.
Wow. And how do they find you? Do they find you through the safe houses that you set up, or how do they find you to get help?
So we have, I mean, our team have established themselves within the community. So there is a lot of word of mouth. There are also what we call trusted partners. We have a dear brother who's probably the greatest evangelist to the Muslim world in our lifetime, possibly since Islam. He has a wonderful social media following, and he's on a lot of TV channels in the Middle East. And he feeds cases to us. So he gets 10,000 communications a month from the Muslim world. He has over 2 million Facebook followers, 300,000 YouTube subscribers, and he is inundated with persecution cases. And then he sends those cases to us. Our team then go and respond to those cases and make sure that those people are who they say they are and follow up with them.
Wow. And so describe kind of the work of this, of like the safe houses. I mean, I know you guys have, I think I read, distributing thousands of these emergency relief kits and setting up safe houses, but talk about some of the practical, what does it look like on the ground in terms of what you're doing?
Sure. So a lot of times I think we're at about 18 safe houses now throughout the region, really from Morocco all the way to Iran. The safe houses, sometimes we do like whole apartment blocks. In some cases, we would just rent just one apartment. Those apartments are designated really for the extreme cases of people that need what we might call like a lightning case. A lightning case is where someone needs to get out of a dangerous situation right now. The long-term rentals, like when we do long-term, we would actually do that as a case, and we would actually just help them with their cost of living expenses. But in the safe housing, those are more immediate needs of getting out of a dangerous situation. And our reps in those countries manage those properties. We do run into the occasional breakdown where maybe someone's phone is stolen or some information is leaked, and we have to close down a location and we have to set up another location. We had that happen in Egypt recently, where our safe house was raided after a woman whose parents had claimed that we had stolen her, kidnapped her, and brainwashed her. They then went to the authorities, and that exposed the whole house. So we do run a risk with that. Our team actually run some of the greatest risks because they will oftentimes rent these places in their own name. So there is a complexity to how we structure these various lease agreements and how we control these assets.
So safe houses, emergency relief kits, you're actually underwriting business creation of small businesses, micro, businesses, it sounds like, to establish sustainability for people who are relocating. Is that right?
Yeah, so roughly about a third of our expenses are safe housing, and then you're probably looking at about 15% are on the enduring livelihood, and the remaining balance is more the cost of living and lightning funds. Those would be your majority of our expenses.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Um, how do people? So how who helps fund this, and how do people get involved if they wanted to help fund or support this?
We're primarily individual gifts that come through individual donors in the U.S. and Australia and Canada and UK as well. We actually have charities in those countries, and then foundations. So we have some foundation giving, and churches are actually increasingly becoming a more significant funding source for us. But yeah, we started with just a handful of supporters, just a couple hundred supporters, and we've really grown that. In addition to growing kind of the donor network, there's been a prayer network that has grown. I mean, when we first launched, I think we had just a couple of hundred people who got our prayer points every Saturday morning, and now I think we're over 7,000 people receiving our prayer points every Saturday morning. So
Wow.
we are heavily dependent on support, financial support, as well as those people who commit to praying individually for our team and our cases.
Yeah. I just think it's so important that actually, the actual realities that are happening. I mean, people need to learn about this. I mean, people
Mhm.
need to know. Because I mean, I had no idea the magnitude. I knew because I did a little bit of work in India. I knew a little bit about what was going on there, but I didn't understand the magnitude of it. Before we go, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening right now? Because I think a lot of people are interested in Afghanistan.
Dean, this has been the craziest 6 months of my life. What we have seen and witnessed beginning August 15th in Afghanistan was something I don't think I could have ever imagined in terms of a decline that quickly. When the Taliban came into Afghanistan, I think it caught a lot of people by surprise, including international observers and the U.S. Obviously, the U.S. embassy and the U.S. government. But the uh, the manner in which we withdrew, the U.S. withdrew, and the attack that the Taliban made on the Christian community and other minorities was swift. And so we had many Christians on our list that had come through Afghan Bible College, Afghan Christian Council, who had family members disappearing in the middle of the night. They had messages coming to their phones saying, "We know who you are. We know where you are. We're eventually going to catch up with you." And so we really had to spring into action. And God gave us a wonderful team of Hazara, which is a minority Shia population of Hazaras, who really safe housed a lot of these Christians, primarily in the northern part of the state of the country. And we were able to keep them alive through a series of cash houses and different financial arrangements that we had in Afghanistan for safe housing. And then on October 20th, we did 2 flights out with about 400 Christians, again, through those 2 sources, Afghan Bible College and Afghan Christian Council. And we currently have them in Abu Dhabi in a humanitarian village city refugee camp. And it's been slow. A lot of these people have been stuck for 150, 200 days. And so we're hopeful that Western nations are going to step up and take these people. We're hearing some positive news lately that the U.S. will send some planes in to bring these people out. But there are still, our guess is there's probably a few hundred Christians still left in Afghanistan that are in hiding. We had some people that were supposed to make our flight on October 20th that didn't, and they're literally going from location to location, running from the Taliban. And it's a horrifying thing that we're witnessing, and obviously Ukraine has kind of eclipsed that. And but the reality is the Taliban is not, they're not letting up, and they are very much going to they want to eradicate any minority or anybody who does not subscribe to their form of Islam.
Wow. So we got a lot to pray about. We got a lot to you and your team. I certainly admire and applaud what you're doing. I'm glad that we get to spread the word. Is it htp.org?
That's right, htp.org.
htp.org, Help the Persecuted. Josh, Youssef, thank you. Thanks for what you're doing, and we're with you, and we'll be praying. I need to be added to your Saturday morning prayer list.
We'll make it happen. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. It's great to have you. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.